Hello everybody, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to day 3 of Witchlands Week. For those of you who don't know already, I'm doing something called Witchlands Week on my channel, which is where I'm doing videos every single day about the Witchlands series by Susan Dennard in the run-up to the release of Witch Shadow, the 4th book in the series, which comes out next Tuesday on the 22nd of June. This is one of my favourite book series ever, and it's one that a lot of people have read, but I don't see a lot of people talk about, so which is why I'm going to be sitting in my corner of the internet making as much noise about it as I possibly can. So if you haven't checked out my other 2 videos, I've given you a sort of spoiler-free synopsis of the series and what I love about it, as well as a discussion on whether you should read the novella Sightwitch. And today I'm going to be doing a book tag that I have created for this series. I've never made a book tag before, so I hope these prompts are fun and not too generic. I've tried to come up with something interesting because I haven't really found that many Witchlands book tags, so I thought I'll make my own. So the first prompt is for Safi, who is one of the main characters in the series, and a quote surrounding this character is, "You could bend and shape the world, Sophia, if only you knew how." So what is a book that had an impact on you / shaped your world? And for me, that's going to go with Starfish by Aeduan. This is a young adult contemporary following a young girl who is desperately trying to get into her dream art school, so she can escape her home life with her sort of narcissistic and racist mother who she has a very tenuous relationship with. But when she doesn't get into her dream art school, she doesn't really know what to do with herself until her childhood best friend Jamie turns up and offers her the opportunity to come with him to the other side of America to tour some art schools around there and get away from everything. And everything sort of goes from there. And this book is impactful for me because Kiko, our main character, her relationship with her mother is exactly like one of the relationships that I have with one of my parents, and just seeing, she also has social anxiety, which I also have a bit of myself, and I just related so much to a lot of the things that happen in this book, and especially with this parental figure, to have someone from a completely different walk of life who I don't know to put down in a book basically exact same things that have happened to me and exact same, you know, thoughts and approaches, and I just relate to Kiko so much from that point of view, and just to have someone else write down that this has happened to them too is incredibly comforting. And you know, you sort of spend the entire time thinking, oh, maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, maybe this isn't that bad, but actually to read about it in a completely different context with similar things though just makes this book so incredibly special to me, to just have that complete being able to relate to it as much as I can. And it's a really good book. Mhe Verujta is one of my favourite writers. Her writing is fantastic and I really recommend it, but yeah, this is a book that has had an impact on me. Prompt number 2 is Truthwitch. In the books there is a type of witch you can get which can tell truth from lie, so what is a book that is based on a true story? And for that I'm going to have to go with The Marks Left on Her by D. Leibowitz. This is a memoir following the survival story of a character simply named Girl, who grows up in Hong Kong, moves to Paris, and just how her family members have treated her, as well as all the men in her life and the way she is used and abused, and how she comes out of that as a survivor and how she survives all of that. This is an incredible book. If you go over to either my Goodreads or my Instagram, I have actually done a full review where I've put down all my thoughts into writing on this book, because I need to take my time when I talk about this, because not only is this based on a true story, and I feel that therefore it deserves the respect of me sitting down and thinking about what I have to write about it, but it is just such an incredible story to read about, and it was incredibly emotional and emotive, and I find a hard time actually articulating exactly how amazing this book is and what it is I love about it. So definitely go and check out my reviews on Instagram and Goodreads, but I will give trigger warnings for sexual abuse, drug abuse, suicide attempts, self-harm, body horror really at one point. You know, it's heavy stuff, but it's not a sad book. I really enjoyed it, and it's just an amazing and powerful story of this one woman's survival, and inspired by the Me Too movement, and you can definitely understand that through the way that it almost addresses particularly the men and how they have all treated this one character. Yeah, as I said, it's hard to articulate exactly how good this book is, but yeah, fantastic book. Next up is Iseult, one of the other main characters, and she is a Threadwitch who kind of wears her heart on her sleeve and is very emotional. So this prompt is simply an emotional book, and for me I have to go with The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. I don't often cry at books. This is the one time that I think I have actually burst into tears over a book. I remember reading it, I was in public as well, so I was trying very hard not to cry, because the ending of this book is just so sad and unexpected. If you don't know The Book Thief, it's about a girl in Nazi Germany, and yeah, she basically just ends up stealing books. The narrator's death, and you sort of see things from death's perspective and things. It's a very, very, very good book, but not one that I can find myself rereading a lot of the time. A, because I know I'm probably going to cry at it, and B, it is quite heavily written, I think, in my opinion, but it is a very good book. But yeah, that's one of the few times I have actually cried physically at a book. So number 4 is Threadsister. In the Witchlands there is this concept of your found family actually being tied to you by invisible threads that can only be seen by Threadwitches. So for this prompt, choose a book about siblings. And for that I definitely have to go with Daughters of Mhe by Rennie K. Amayo. This is a story that follows 2 twins separated at birth because the leader of the land, which is based on ancient Nigeria, was told in a prophecy that the gods and goddesses that have sort of disappeared from the world will return, and the goddess will return as a pair of twins. So he decreed that all twins must be slaughtered at birth to stop the rise of these magical people. But obviously since they got separated, he doesn't know they exist, and you follow both Sinai and Nala in their separate lives. And it's just such a good book about female friendship and magic and just all the stuff that they go through. There's a sort of, you know, travelling adventure story on one side, there's a sort of coming of age magic story on the other. And it's really, really good. Despite the fact that they're twins, they're definitely given their own voice and their own narrative and their own arc. They don't feel like 2 copies of the same character. And it's just a really, really good book that I'm probably going to gush about in detail later in the future, because this is a highly underrated book and I absolutely love it. So number 5 is Merik, one of the other main characters from the series, and his character arc is definitely about paying attention to what people say to him and not coming up with his own conclusions and actually listening to what is being said to him. So, and he's quite often wrong about people, and because of these conclusions that he sort of not jumps to but sort of forms in his mind and then won't look at the evidence for anything that suggests the contrary. So what is a book that you were initially wrong about, either because you thought it was going to be good and it turned out to be bad, or you thought you wouldn't enjoy it but you ended up loving it? And for that I definitely have to go with Deep Light. This is a book that for the first half of it, it took me months to get through it. I was so bored with it, but I'm not really a person to DNF. I like to at least get to the end of a book. And I wasn't really enjoying it. I found one of the characters quite, I think, perhaps triggering to read about. Just the way he acted and the way the main character responded was just something that hit a little bit too close to home with some aspects. So I found that really difficult to actually read about. But then once that kind of sort of got past that, I loved this book. I loved the deaf representation and the way that was treated and how that was included in the culture. I loved the sort of friendship between the sort of 3 characters that you end up following for the second half.
Okay, I'm editing and I realise I never actually gave you a brief synopsis of what Deep Light is about, so I'll give my guess, let's go here. It's basically set in this sort of seaside town where people will go diving into the sea to find bits of the gods, because the gods from decades ago have died because they sort of went to war with each other, and they were actual creatures but now they've died, and people will go and fish for bits of their body because they kind of still have magic attached to them and they can sell it for loads of money. And you follow the main character Hark, who him and his friend Jelt find a still beating heart of one of the gods, and they begin to sort of use it to their advantage because they've realised that it kind of allows them to heal people, but slowly it seems to be doing something to Jelt, and Hark's not sure if he should stay loyal to him anymore, what he should do. And yeah, don't think I've explained it particularly well, but it is a really, really good book. And anyway, yes, that's a brief synopsis. Back to my weird ramblings.
I loved the world building, I loved the visuals that I thought of when I was reading the descriptions. I loved the whole concept of, because they talk about sort of the undersea, because you've got like the normal sea, and then if you dive down deep enough you can sort of penetrate through a barrier and end up in a sort of a body of water where the gods live, and you can breathe, and the colours are all really vibrant, and yeah, it's just such a cool idea, and I'm very glad that I kept going with this book, and it's one of the reasons why I don't DNF, is because, you know, if I hadn't pushed through, I would never have found this book that I absolutely adore. Next prompt is Aeduan. He's a blood witch who has the ability to smell people's blood, and when he uses his power his eyes turn red. So what is a book that has red on the cover? For this I'm going with Hero at the Fall. This is the third book in the Rebel in the Sands trilogy, with Rebel in the Sands, Traitor to the Throne, and then Hero at the Fall. I love these book covers so much, just, you know, the other two are kind of like this, with the first one being turquoise, the second one being purple with the gold and just almost the monochrome and stuff. It's so pretty. I absolutely love this series. Again, not one I see people talk about much, but I definitely recommend it. It's really, really good. As I said, this is the third book in the series, but it's sort of set in sort of a desert, and this sort of small village in the desert, and this young girl who wants to sort of get out of there but isn't able to because of sort of the expectations of women, and sort of that kind of drags her down a bit and sort of stops her at all her plans. And there's gin and ginnies and magic and a political uprising against the Sultan and things. It's such a good series and beautiful covers. My next prompt is, and I'm going to butcher this, Mhe Verujta, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm very sorry, which is a saying in the books that means trust me as if my soul were yours. What is an author that you trust to always write books you will love? It's basically, who's your author? I've kind of mentioned it already, but definitely Akemi Dawn Bowman. She's written 3 contemporaries that I love to death, and her debut into fantasy is one of my favourite books of the year so far. I love her writing style, I love her main characters, I love just the different themes she explores, and all of her books are just so fantastic, and I just know I'm going to love them. I've already given the synopsis of Starfish. Her other contemporaries are Summerbird Blue and Harley in the Sky. So Summerbird Blue follows this girl after the death of her sister in a car accident. Her mother sends her to live with her aunt in Hawaii whilst the two of them both try to deal with their grief. And it's definitely sort of about the main character Rumi trying to find her own identity without her sister, and she and her sister used to write songs together, and before she died she started writing a song called Summerbird Blue together, and Rumi's trying to find the strength to finish this song and say goodbye to her sister, really, whilst, you know, making friends and sort of just coming to terms with her grief. Her other contemporary is Harley in the Sky. It's about a girl who wants to be a trapeze aerialist, but her parents sort of want to push her to go to college to at least sort of have a backup plan, which she doesn't want to do. She wants to start her training now, and so she runs away to join a sort of rival circus. Her parents own a circus, and she runs away to join their sort of main competitor, and everything sort of goes from there. She has a bit of a romance, she comes to terms with her own mental health and the relationship she has with her parents, and specifically her mum. Such a good book, and it feels so magical despite the fact that it is a sort of contemporary. And then finally The Infinity Courts is about a girl who dies and wakes up in the afterlife, where it is being taken over by a sentient AI, and she gets caught up in the war between the humans and the AI consciousness in this sort of afterlife place. Which, again, as I said, fantastic book. I discussed The Infinity Courts in my April wrap-up, as well as a spoilery discussion, which you can find on my channel. Such a good fantasy book, and I think more people should absolutely read. But yeah, every single thing that Akemi Dawn Bowman writes, I will be reading. Next up is Leopold. So Leopold is sort of a side character, but he's one of my favourites, which is why I've included him in this tag. And he is a character that puts on a bit of a mask and a bit of a show, and you don't really exactly know what his motivations and what his deal is, really. So what is a book whose insides do not match the outsides? So either good cover, bad book, bad cover, great book. So for the bad cover, great book, I'm going to go with The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This is what my copy of it looks like, and looks pretty unassuming. I don't really think it's a particularly standout cover, but the story is one of my favourite classics. Well, I don't actually read that many classics, but I absolutely love The Woman in White. I'll read it time and time again. It's such a good sort of detective novel. You follow lots of different characters. Marianne Halcombe is one of my favourite female characters in fiction. She's iconic. and it's just, I absolutely love it. I really enjoyed the BBC adaptation that they did of this back in like the 80s. It's just one of my sort of close to my heart. Love this book, and I will read it time and time again, but the covers, you know, could be better. And for a book that has a good cover, but I didn't particularly enjoy, I'm going to go with The Deathless Girls. Love this cover, I mean, look at that. Beautiful. But I didn't know that it was supposed to be a sort of retelling of like Dracula's wives. Apparently that's another part of the folklore. So I loved the start of it and the whole idea about them from this community where at like their 16th birthday or something they go before one of their sort of tribespeople and will get sort of, they'll find out what their sort of talent is and what their skill is and then that'll influence what they'll go on to do within their community and with their life. I loved all that stuff, I loved the two characters, but yeah, once it sort of got into like vampires and stuff and I was like, oh, is this where we're going? And I was like, I don't really enjoy that sort of stuff. So I think if I'd known that going in I might have enjoyed it more, but the fact that I didn't and I liked the premise and then it went in a completely different direction and I was just a bit disappointed with it. Next prompt is Caer Arwen, which is a mythical pair of witches in the Witchlands, an Ether Witch and a Void Witch, and they are destined to bring balance to the Witchlands. And obviously, being an Ether Witch with a Void Witch, they're sort of supposed to balance each other. So what are two books that kind of complement each other? And for this prompt I'm going with The Starless Sea and The Binding. So if you like The Starless Sea, I would recommend reading The Binding and vice versa, because they have sort of similar vibes whilst also being quite different. The Starless Sea is a fantasy book that follows Zachary as he finds this book in his university library that, when upon reading, is a collection of lots of different stories, but one chapter involves a detailed description of something that happened to him as a child that he never told anyone about, and obviously finding this in there he wants to know how they found out about that, where it came from, and he kind of goes on a bit of a journey to discover where this book came from, and that all leads into what the story is about. And The Binding by Bridget Collins is set in a world that's vaguely 19th century England, and you follow this boy called Emmett as he is suffering from a strange illness that causes him to black out, and he's very weak and is unable to keep up with his work on his parents' farm. So he gets sent to be an apprentice to the bookbinder, and in this world the bookbinders are people who take people's memories and bind them into books, and the person who's had their memory bound will then no longer remember that memory, nor will they remember having gone to the bookbinder in the first place. And that whole concept of like the books and things being woven through the world building stuff is like honestly fantastic. The reason why I recommend these books together is because they do have like similar themes. They're both books and about stories, but in very different ways. Obviously the stories in this book will be people's actual memories, and the stories in The Starless Sea are kind of about, they are about things that actually happened though, but you don't know which ones are and which ones are just metaphors, and there's sort of stories within stories and books within books, and I love that aspect of The Starless Sea. It's so whimsical and so magical. And they both have really great romances that I really like, and they both have very interesting main characters. They just kind of remind me of one another. So let me know if you agree, if you have read both of these and you think they kind of complement each other in a sort of strange way. Obviously this one's more historical fantasy and that one's definitely more magical, just fantasy-ish. So yeah, but let me know what you think, if you think The Binding and The Starless Sea go together, and if you do decide to pick up the other one of these, so if you've read The Starless Sea and then decide to pick up The Binding and vice versa, do let me know, am I right? Do they complement each other? Just do they sort of go well together? You know, let me know. My final prompt is Witch Shadow. So the synopsis of the book coming out next week sounds almost as if Iseult's going to have to decide whether she's going to go down a darker path with her magic or not. Interesting concept, can't wait to read it. So what is a character who goes down a perhaps darker path? For this I'm going with Jasmine from Witches Steeped in Gold. She is definitely a character who perhaps doesn't go down a villainous arc, but is definitely becoming an antagonist, I think, at least to the other main character in this book. And I just found her story arc to be so compelling, and it's honestly the only thing that kept me reading this book because I didn't enjoy the rest of it. I thought her motivations were really well rounded, and she definitely believes that she's in the right and she's doing all the right things and she's the right person to be queen, and I love seeing that in a antagonist and in a sort of villain type character, and I'm torn between whether or not I want to continue the series because I want to see what happens with Jasmine's character, but at the same time I don't care about the other characters enough. If you want to see more thoughts on what I think about this, I did cover it in my May wrap-up video, which I'll link on the screen. But yeah, that's a character who goes through a sort of darker path, or at least antagonistic path. Thank you very much for watching. That was the Witchlands book tag that I created. Please do it if you want to, if you like these prompts, if you have read the Witchlands and want to do a book tag around that. Please do it, and please let me know. I'd love to see your responses to these different prompts and the books you recommend. As I said, this is Witchlands Week on my channel. I'm doing Witchlands content every single day. If you haven't seen my other 2 videos, please feel free to go check those out. Comment down below if you've read any of these books. What do you think of them? Do you like them? Do you dislike them? And in terms of tagging people, I don't know that many people who have read it on BookTube that I talk to and stuff, so this is just a general tag for everyone who's read the Witchlands. If you want to do this tag, please do, and please let me know. And even if you haven't read the books, if you just like these prompts and want to join in, do it. You have been tagged. And again, let me know if you do it because I'd love to see your videos. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you tomorrow.